King Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, was now, well, old. His once jet-black hair was now grayer than the stones of the temple he built. His knees creaked louder than the doors of the palace, and he sighed so much that even the palace attendants started sighing with him out of habit. His wisdom had built Israel into a thriving kingdom, but his choices, especially his love for, well, a lot of women, had also led to trouble. 700 wives and 300 concubines, don't ask how he remembered their names, had turned his palace into a place busier than a Jerusalem marketplace. Even worse, many of them brought their foreign gods into the kingdom, and Solomon, despite all his wisdom, let it happen. One day, as he sat on his grand throne, stroking his beard in deep thought, an old friend, Nathan's grandson Azariah, approached him. "Your Majesty, I bring news," Azariah said hesitantly. "If it's about another wife wanting a golden statue in her chamber, tell her the treasury is closed," Solomon groaned. "No, my lord. It's about the Lord himself. He is not pleased with your extracurricular activities regarding other gods." Solomon sat up straighter, his heart sinking. He had always known this day would come. The Lord had warned him, but he had been too distracted by love, power, and the occasional debate about whose wisdom was greater. Spoiler, it was always his. That night, as Solomon lay in bed, a dream came to him. The Lord's voice, deep and resounding, filled his mind. "Solomon, you were given wisdom beyond any man, yet you turned away from me. Because of this, your kingdom will be torn apart after you are gone. Not in your days for the sake of your father David, but in your sons." Solomon woke up in a cold sweat. Oh no, Rehoboam. Rehoboam, his son, was many things, strong, confident, and unfortunately as wise as a sack of barley. The thought of him running the kingdom made Solomon's head hurt more than his old war stories. Determined to fix things, Solomon called his officials, scribes, and his personal royal coffee maker, because thinking required caffeine. "We need to bring the people back to the Lord," he announced. "Great idea, Your Majesty," said one scribe. "Shall we remove the foreign gods?" "Yes." "Shall we reinforce the laws of Moses?" "Absolutely." "Shall we also limit the number of royal marriages from now on?" A long silence filled the room. Solomon shifted in his seat. "Let's focus on the first two for now." Despite his efforts, Solomon knew the damage was done. The people had tasted foreign ways, and his son was not the leader Israel needed. He spent his last days writing, reflecting, and maybe even regretting. Some say that's when he wrote Ecclesiastes, lamenting, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." Translation, "What was I thinking?" In the end, Solomon died knowing that the kingdom would soon break apart. His wisdom had built an empire, but his compromises had weakened its foundation. As for Rehoboam, well, let's just say his first major decision involved angering half the nation and losing 10 tribes in a single meeting. And thus, the legacy of the wisest king ended, not with a bang, but with a tragic lesson. Even the wisest can fall when they stop listening to the one who gave them wisdom in the first place. As Solomon neared the end of his days, he often sat in the palace gardens, watching the sunset over Jerusalem, the city he had built with wisdom but nearly lost through folly. He saw the grand temple, its golden splendor reflecting the last light of day, and sighed. One evening, as he rested under a great olive tree, an old servant approached him. "Your Majesty, you have ruled with wisdom beyond any man. What words shall we remember you by?" Solomon chuckled bitterly. "Remember me not for my wisdom, but for my mistakes. Wisdom without obedience is like a chariot without wheels. It may look grand, but it will never take you where you need to go." The servant bowed and left, but Solomon remained. That night, he wrote his final words, a somber reflection of all he had learned. "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." Ecclesiastes 12:13. As the ink dried, Solomon breathed his last. The next morning, the people of Israel woke to a kingdom still standing, but cracks had already formed. His son Rehoboam would soon shatter it, and so the wisest man who ever lived left behind a kingdom divided, a legacy of both glory and warning, and a final lesson whispered by the winds of Jerusalem. True wisdom is not just knowing what is right, it is living it.